Hello everyone, welcome to the 7th edition of Drive Time with Mike, the lesson format we use at Walnut Street Church of Christ for our small groups known as community drive groups. Thanks for riding with me. Today, I want you to look at Luke chapter 5 verses 1 through 11. Luke chapter 5 verses 1 through 11, and we're going to talk about the importance of our obedience to God. A lot of people can be blessed, including your own self. A lot of people can be blessed by your obedience to God. And in this story, we see that happening. Peter, called Simon in this story, this is the Apostle Peter. Peter, called Simon in this story, will obey Jesus' commands, and as a result, he and a lot of people are blessed. So Jesus comes around the lake of Gennesaret, and there's a crowd of people following him, and they want to hear a word from God, but they're pressing on him. So Jesus feels like he doesn't really have enough space to be able to teach effectively. So he sees a couple of empty boats, and he sees the owner of the boat, that's Simon Peter. He sees the owner of the boat washing his nets on the shore. Now he hops into this boat, one of these boats, and he just expects Peter to do what he says. He says to Peter, he says, "Push me out a little ways." Peter does so. So he pushes him out a little ways, and then Jesus begins to teach other people. And so because of Simon Peter's obedience, a lot of other people got to hear a message from God. And God will do the same thing in your life. If you will be obedient, a lot of opportunities will come up for people to hear the message of God through you, through your life, through your circumstances. Now, I want to note two things. Number one, the boat that Jesus got into was actually Peter's workspace. God will invade your workspace in order to have others hear about him through you. Don't buy into this idea that nobody talks about religion at work or politics at work or whatever. People talk about that stuff all the time. Think in your own life, and you know that religion and politics always comes up. No matter where you are, people talk about it. I would encourage you to be very careful about what you say, how you say it, and when you say it. But don't be afraid to talk about God at work, because it will come up. Just choose your timing, choose your wording well. Okay? God will use your work environment, he'll use your relationships, he'll use your hobbies, he'll use all of your daily activities. And he'll leverage those things in order for other people to hear about him. So participate in that. Okay, here's the other thing. Peter had a rotten day at work. He was washing his nets. He was done for the day. He had been out fishing all night, and he didn't catch anything. But that didn't stop him from obeying Jesus when Jesus gave him something to do, when Jesus commanded something of him. He still obeyed Jesus. And as a result, people got to hear about God because of Peter's obedience. Now, let me move on. After this happens, Jesus tells Peter, "Come on, get in the boat with me. Let's go out to the deep waters and go fishing." Now, like I said, Peter had been fishing all night long, and he didn't catch anything. And now he's about to go out and fish, which is in the wrong time of the day, because now he's going to be in the heat of the day instead of the cool of the night when the fish are more active. And he's going to go out after working all night doing this. He's probably tired, but Jesus told him, "Come out and let's go." And so he does. And he gets out there and he drops the nets because Jesus told him to drop the nets. And as he pulls the nets up, there are so many fish in these nets that they're about to break. And so I want you to note two things that happens during this part of the story. First, Peter is personally being blessed because he's obeying God. And this is probably the biggest blessing of his life up to this point. Probably never had a catch like this before, ever, on any given day. It's not just that the nets are breaking because the because the catch is so big. He actually calls over his work associates, James and John, to bring the other boat, and they start trying to fill the boats up with the catch, and the boats actually begin to sink with the weight of the fish. I mean, this is a huge blessing, a huge catch. And so not only through his obedience is Peter blessed, but also people around him are blessed by his obedience. That's pretty significant. James and John, who are his work associates, are blessed because of Peter's obedience. Now, another thing that's very interesting is that Peter realizes who he is and who Jesus is. He actually says, "Depart from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." He recognizes who he is. He also recognizes who God is. And you know what Jesus is doing? He's actually turning Peter's heart towards God in a way that it never was. And so Peter's being blessed on multiple accounts. James and John's hearts will also be turned to God in a way in which they never were. These are 3 apostles later on in life. But all of this occurs because Peter was willing to obey God, even when he probably thought it was nuts, going fishing at the wrong time, after they've already failed, after they've been fishing all night, after they're tired, probably ready to go home. He does what God tells him, and their hearts are turned towards God. They get the biggest catch they probably ever caught, and his friends are witnesses to this. So people get to hear God's word. Peter's personally blessed. His friends are personally blessed because he's been obedient. Then one last thing happens. Jesus says to Peter, he says, "Don't worry, Peter. From now on, you're not going to be a fisherman. You're not going to go out fishing trying to catch fish. Instead, you're going to start catching souls. You're going to do God's work." Peter discovered his true calling in life, which incidentally was bigger than his occupation. His calling in life had to do with God's occupation. It had to do with saving souls, catching souls. But he gets to the shore, and in verse 11 it says the oddest thing to me. It says that they just caught the biggest catch of their lives, these fishermen. And what do? They drop their nets, they leave their boats. It literally says they left everything and followed Jesus. Now, your obedience to God is always a choice. Always a choice. You will always be faced with the choice of whether to be obedient to God or not. You may not be called to leave your occupation. Not everybody is. Now, I felt like I was called to leave my occupation to go into ministry. A lot of people don't feel that way, and you're not necessarily called to do that. God may not make you choose between serving Him and your occupation. But even if you stay in your occupation, there will come times in your life, in your job, in your relationships, during your hobbies, at your home, in your family, well, you will have to choose between God and maybe your occupation, or maybe a relationship, or maybe a hobby, or maybe a friendship. And I don't just mean that it's that you choose God and ditch these other things. I mean you're going to have to choose what's the most important. Sometimes it's scary to talk about God on the job, but are you willing to put God first? Will you put Jesus first in that working relationship? Will you put Jesus first in your relationships with others or in your family? So those things are significant. If you will choose to be obedient to God first, I promise you, you will be blessed. Others will be blessed. You may discover your calling if you don't know what it is. And others just might discover their calling too. I hope you're encouraged by these words. God bless you.